All right. Shalom to all the viewers out there. And we praise the Most High for allowing us to come together to go through another message. The subject that we're going to touch on today is the topic of the Gentiles being grafted in. A lot of you Gentiles out there are going to learn something today in this lesson. And it's called chronology. You're going to learn chronological order on how the Gentiles got grafted in. You're going to learn three things today in this message. You're going to learn when, in correct chronological order, the Gentiles were afforded the chance to get grafted in. You're going to learn why the Gentiles were grafted in. And you're going to learn how the Gentiles were grafted in. Because a lot of you don't have any understanding on any of that. A lot of you don't have any correct chronological order understanding on this subject. So that's what you're going to learn today. So you need to grab your pen, your paper, close your lips, sit down and just learn. Because the Christian church is not going to teach you anything, so you might as well just sit back with your pen and paper and just listen and learn. I'm Brother Yarashalam. This is the Bible Unlocked, the Gentiles grafted in. Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Gentiles. Usually it means a non-Israelite people. Gentile, that's the first thing we're going to start out. The definition of Gentile. It usually means a non-Israelite people. That means 9 out of 10 times when you see the word Gentile, it's talking about someone who's not an Israelite. That's what it's referring to. And it says usually because there are some exceptions where the term Gentile can mean an Israelite. There are a few exceptions, which we'll go through in other lessons. But usually, meaning most of the time, the word Gentile means a non-Israelite person. So now that we have that understanding of what a Gentile means, the definition of it, let's go into the scriptures, and I want to clear one thing up first. Because a lot of you out there believe that when Christ jumped on the scene, that he was had some big melting pot of different races around him and different nationalities, and that everybody was just coming along and holding hands and kumbayan. That's what a lot of you have the misconception on. And I'm going to show you first that Christ, when he was on the scene, was not dealing with Gentiles. He was not, his mission primarily when he was on earth was not for Gentiles. It was for his own people. It was for the 12 tribes of Israel. So I want to clear this up first before we find out how the Gentiles came into the fold. Matthew 15, verse 24. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Messiah said that he was not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This was a Syrophoenician or a Greek woman came beseeching him for him to heal her daughter. And he says, I'm not sent but only to my own people. That's what he said. When he's on earth, that was his response. I'm not sent but only to my own people at this particular time. So eventually, when you continue reading down in the chapter, he did eventually give this lady her request, but this is after she had to endure lines of disrespect. He called the lady a dog. He said it's not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. But even after all that, she still had humility and was humble enough to still sit there and acknowledge, like, okay, that's no problem, but I still need the blessing. So eventually he did give this lady her request. But that don't take away from what he just said. He said, I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That was his mission. Let's get some more. Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. These 12 Christ commanded. He didn't give a suggestion. He commanded. You know what happens like when your mom tells you to do something? That's a command. When your dad tells you to do something, that's a command. When the police officers tell you to do something, that's a command. Christ commanded his 12 disciples and said, don't go preaching to the Gentiles. He says, don't go preaching to the Gentiles, but rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, why is Christ saying that? Because when he was on earth, his mission was primarily for his own people. That's what you're going to read when you go through the scriptures. It was for his own people. The Gentiles were not in mention when Christ was on the scene, as you're going to find out even more as we continue going through this lesson. Christ was dealing with his own people. Now, let's get the Christian scholars, your Christian scholars, let's see if they have the same interpretation when they go through the scriptures, or if they're lying to you in the Christian church. Let's find out if I'm just making this up, or if my interpretation is incorrect. And let's go to the Christian scholars and find out what they say. Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Gentiles. While the teaching of Jesus ultimately broke down the middle wall of partition between Jews and Gentile, as it is seen in the writings of Paul and in Acts, yet Jesus limited his ministry to Jews. He limited the ministry to the Israelites. As we just went over the scriptures, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He limited his ministry to the Jews, because you're not going to read in the scriptures Christ going out and preaching to the Gentiles. You're not going to read about Christ going out to Asia and preaching to the Asians. You're not going to read about Christ going to Europe and preaching to the Europeans, or to Africa preaching to the Africans. You're not going to read that in the scriptures. You're going to read him staying in the land of Israel amongst his own people. That's what you're going to read. With rare exceptions, Samaritan, John 4 verse 1 through 42, the Syrophoenician woman, the Greeks in John, he instructed his 12 disciples, go not into the way of the Gentiles. Now, this is what the Christian scholars know. A lot of you get upset when this information comes out, but that's not my problem. You shouldn't be upset with me for bringing out the information. You need to be upset with these people who's bringing out the information. That's who you need to be upset with. The Christian scholars and the Christian organization, while they're sitting there in church teaching you one thing about some made up Christ that don't exist in the Bible, and then they're going behind your back scribbling in the books, writing the correct information in the books. That's what they're doing. Telling you a false doctrine and then going behind and writing the real information in the books, because they know they can teach you anything in the Christian church, and you're just gonna absorb it all. You're gonna swallow it and eat everything that they tell you in there. So they know the people in the Christian church, they can feed you anything, but they know the people who actually gonna buy the dictionaries. They know these people actually read. These people actually ask questions. These people actually have an independent thought, unlike the Christian church. So they know that they have to write the correct information to the best of their ability inside of these dictionaries. So that's who you need to be upset with, the people that's going behind your back doing this stuff, because they know, they've read and studied these scriptures to a T. So they know what's in this Bible. But they're going to tell you something different in the Christian church, because it's all psychology and mind control. All psychology and mind control. That's what it is. Now, with that being said, let's go into the account where the Gentiles first were able to get grafted in. You're going to find out that this didn't happen until Acts the 10th chapter, after the death of Christ. This is what I said, you're going to get correct chronology. So now we have Christ, who's saying he's not dealing with Gentiles. Now we're going to go to Acts the 10th chapter with Cornelius. This is the first time that the Gentile was able to get grafted in, with Cornelius in Acts the 10th chapter. Acts is after the Gospels, to all you that don't know. This Acts is after Christ's death and ascension up into the heavens. Let's go and get the account from Peter, who was the head apostle under Christ. Acts chapter 10, verse 28. And he said unto them, ye know how it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. This is Peter speaking, the head apostle under Christ. He says, you know, you Gentiles know that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to be keeping company with you Gentiles. He says, you know this already. And Peter's saying it because Christ never taught them about keeping company with Gentiles, even when Christ was on the scene. That's why Peter's having this revelation in Acts the 10th chapter. That's the whole purpose behind Acts the 10th chapter. He says, you know it's unlawful for us to be keeping company with you. You know this. And Christ never taught them anything else other than that until the Most High came and showed him what he's about to say next. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Now, why did the Most High have to show Peter? Because Christ was on the scene and Christ never taught Peter that. So the Most High had to come after Christ, his death, and show Peter in a vision. And Peter was doubting this vision. Peter was doubting this vision when he was seeing it. But then he realized, okay, the Most High is showing me that I don't have to call the Gentiles common or unclean. This is the beginning of the Gentiles being grafted in, not when Christ was on the scene. Because if the Gentiles were grafted in when Christ was on the scene, there would be no need for Acts the 10th chapter. There would be no need for Cornelius. There would be no need for any of that. But that's the whole purpose behind Cornelius. Now, from here, Acts the 10th chapter, now we're going to go into Paul, the apostle of the Gentiles, and he's going to explain to a T how the Gentiles were grafted in and why the Gentiles were grafted in. That's what he's going to explain. So now we know when the Gentiles were grafted in, after the death of Christ, when Peter received the revelation. And with Cornelius. Nothing to do with Christ or anything that happened during the time of Christ. A lot of you got upset with the John 3:16 video. None of that has to do with Gentiles. The God so loved the world was talking about the world of Israel. That's what it was referring to. Christ wasn't dealing with Gentiles when he was on the scene. It's nothing hard to be understood. There's nothing hard about that to be understood. A lot of you got upset with the John 3:16 video. It has nothing. 90% of Christ, 90% of his parables, of his speeches, had nothing to do with Gentiles. Nothing to do with Gentiles at all. All of it had to do with the children of Israel. 90% of his parables, 90% of the people he was healing, Israelites. His ministry was for his own people. So now let's go find out from Paul how the Gentiles were grafted in and why they were grafted in. That's what we're going to find out now. Romans 11 verse 1. I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. That's what Paul's asking. Has God cast away his people? God forbid. That means no. Who are his people? The Israelites, as Paul just said. God has not cast away his people like the Christian church would love to make you believe, that the Israelites are done away with and everyone else is just in the fold and the Most High just cast away the Israelites. Paul says God forbid. Israelites are not cast away. Romans 11 verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Who's the they? Context, verse 1. The Israelites, all 12 tribes of Israel. Have they, meaning the Israelites, stumbled that they should